see you found our little hiding spot in the universe. Don't get too comfortable. This is a place where you will find those with an experience that's out of this world, and possibly deep within your life. I welcome you to the Oracles with James Tyson. Lean forward and listen. We will pull you into a supernatural journey with guests from around the world, each one experiencing some of the most extraordinary phenomena this wee planet has to offer. Now, here are the Oracles with James Tyson.
Thank you, Liam, and thank you, listener, for tuning in to today's episode of the Oracles with James Tyson. It's me, James, and I'm still going through my list of paranormal investigators I want you to hear from. And today is my friend Rachel Hoffman. She runs a thing called Paranormal Xpeditions with an X, not an E. Also, True Crime Paranormal. You can find those on Facebook. Website's down right now, but on Facebook, Paranormal Xpeditions. If you follow Rachel on Instagram, Rachel Hoffman, or what's really cool is Schooly Fooly. It's her Instagram account of how she is converting this really cool old school bus into a very cool living space. Her little kind of gypsy wagon. Very cool. Been following her there. Actually, my roommate now is fixated on wanting to buy a school bus and fixing it up, and it's all Rachel's fault. So we blame her. We're not going to talk a lot about that. We may touch on it off and on, but we're here to talk about ghosts, and we're going to be talking about murder, suicides. Well, we're talking about dead people, as a paranormal investigator would. It's interesting. Rachel, about 10 years ago, she had a team, and they were on the very first episode of the Travel Channel's Paranormal Challenge when they did an investigation at the Rolling Hills Asylum up in East Bethany, New York. Now, Rachel is from upstate New York, and if you've ever gone to a paranormal conference in the last 13 years, somewhere in the Northeast U.S., you most likely ran into Rachel. She and her team, or she alone, would have been there, and they'd be giving talks about what they've been doing and the types of things that they've run into. We are going to talk about her invisible friend when she was a very, very young girl, and how that invisible friend is still with her. Her abilities, her intuitiveness, and looking into maybe a little bit on where that's come from. But again, she is a woo-woo person like you and I, and we talk about what's coming up in her life now. She's no longer with the team. She's been doing this about 13 years now. She is off on a new venture, and it's a very cool thing we'll touch on. We can't get into it really deeply because who knows, you may end up seeing it on television soon. But she's melding paranormal investigation together with forensics, and on the trail of the missing, murdered people, victims of serial killers. So that's a little bit tasty, isn't it? Well, you guys just sit back and relax, and I'm going to go get Rachel. Hello, Rachel. How are you?
Hi, good. Thanks for having me.
It's nice of you to drop by. How's everything out in New York?
Everything is great. The weather's finally starting to warm up out here, and it's been a long winter. It felt like the spring even was part of the winter, so it's really nice to see some sunshine. Yeah,
lucky you. We get 2 days of sun and 7 days of rain, 2 days of sun. It's driving us crazy here on the West Coast. I appreciate you dropping by. I know you're busy. Follow you on Facebook and Instagram, and you're building a bus, which is really cool, which is fascinating. And for those of you following along at home, go over to her Facebook page, Paranormal Xpeditions with an X and not an E. Paranormal Xpeditions, and also True Crime Paranormal. Is that on Facebook too?
True Crime Paranormal is an outlet that I'm using, so you can find a lot of stuff on YouTube in regards to historical things that I've done. But I'm building a new base for the True Crime Paranormal, and I'm kind of letting it manifest and explode in 2020. And it's kind of just a totally different twist on paranormal and a totally different twist on the perspective of serial killing.
Serial killers?
Yes.
I investigated one of those. I was on a team that followed around a serial killer. That wasn't a whole lot of fun for being somebody who can pick up another person's emotions. It was I stood behind him. It was like between me and him there was a hole like I would fall into. It was the weirdest feeling. In hindsight, of course, because I had no idea what a friggin' high vibration person was compared to a low vibration person. But yeah, standing beside a serial killer, you can sure find out that quick. When your ghostly fascination, your fascination with the dead, when did that start for you?
When I was younger, actually, I had an imaginary friend. Her name was Maybelle Deo, and she was 3 years, 5 months, and 8 days old. And I grew up a little bit, and I asked my dad to install some MTV. And while they were digging the lines, they actually found her body 100 feet from my bedroom window. And her phone was flipped over, and my father was like, "How did you know her name was Maybelle?" Like, you know what I mean? So it became from my imaginary friend to an obvious presence in my company, and she's still with me to this day. Okay.
Never considered seeing if she wanted to cross over or anything, or she just likes being with you?
I never took it into consideration. I had a couple psychics come out to the property to say what they thought might have happened, and it looks to me as though all three of them pointed to the water, pointed to drowning. We were the only family that ever owned the property. So, but what I did notice about her is she's intelligent. She was 3 years old when she died, but she can actually hold a conversation, and she actually is maturing. I don't know if she watched me grow up or if it was just, through the course of time that she actually became more mature, and some of her intelligent responses came across very clear, almost like speaking to another adult.
Any idea what year she passed?
It was 1918.
Oh, so she's been around a lot of grown-ups since then. And
yeah,
listening to conversations and things. And she may have even followed you to school.
Yeah, I think she followed me to a lot of places. I always felt her presence. And the first time that I actually did an audio recording, I was in a state that was about three or 4 hours away from where her body was. And I picked her up on the recording saying Rachel. And I recognized it because I recognized her voice.
Oh, that's fascinating. And she's around still right now.
She's always around. I mean, I don't even know when she's going to appear. It's not like I always constantly see a visual or hear an audio. Sometimes I just feel a presence, and I'm not able to always decipher if it's her or if it's just, another person. That's where the equipment comes handy. Are
you like clairaudient, clairvoyant? Can you see and hear, or just which of your clairs is more active?
I happen to see a lot and I happen to hear a lot, so I don't know which. And I've never really done a scale of where I compared to another person to say how far my abilities range. It's always very surprising to me when I see a ghost. It's always very surprising to me when I hear a ghost. So I never let it, like, I'm not sitting down, I'm humble about it. You know what I mean? I can actually feel my heart stop or heart race, at times. I get really excited about the interaction.
Oh, that's kind of cool. And that's been ever since you were a little kid?
Ever since I was little. And it started with her, but again, because the property was 100 years past, nobody had lived on it for all that time, except for my family. Her family of 5 had also been buried on my property. So there was several types of hauntings. I saw several types of ghosts, and I was always confirmed by my grandmother and confirmed by my father and my sister. We were all seeing the same thing. I wasn't a chosen one. We were all very aware of the fact that there was a presence on our property. Me and my dad saw her in the same day, in the same dress. You could take us and separate us, and we could tell you the same exact thing.
Oh, that's fascinating. The side of your family, it sounds like your father is also intuitive.
Yes.
What is his background? Like what?
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
He's Native American.
And
I was raised without electricity and very modest upbringing. And so we didn't have a lot of interference with electronics and things like that. It wasn't until I was older that my dad started, being like, okay, well, you can have a TV and we can start installing things, to modernize our lives. So I had the unique ability to be one-on-one with these ghosts without any interference, not electrical nor social or anything. I was raised pretty much, not in isolation exactly, but in Amish territory.
Okay. Your mother's side of the family, throw this out there, is there Irish in there?
No, my mom is Bohemian and Native American.
Okay.
Do I look?
No. It's one of those things that I'm always. It's a list I'm checking off for my own little surveys. It's for very high vibration people. If you're Caucasian, our Aboriginal Caucasians are Welsh, Irish, Scottish, Scandinavian with a dip into the Black Forest in Germany.
Oh,
and then the inside of the boot of Italy, the coast of France, Spain, Portugal, and then into Morocco, mountain higher areas of Morocco.
Right. My people are from a small patch of land outside of Germany it's like called Bohemia, like it's in a Bohemian area. And my original last name is Von Hoff.
Von Hoff? That would
Von
be,
Hoff.
But that's not your, that's your father's side?
That's my father's side, yeah. So I have a little bit of a mixture of both when you're talking about ethnic background.
Yeah, so you've got, and the reason being is if you went back, and this is, again, just to remind my listener, if you went back 300 or 400 years in those areas, if you're a Caucasian from those areas, they were still living with the earth and not off of the earth. So
Yes.
they were still identifying with elemental beings. They still saw things, and it wasn't kind of the wave of Christianity and religion didn't really push it out of people. They were still seeing the little sprites and the fairies in the forest and things like that. So that's the Aboriginal side of the white folks.
Yeah, and I think I've been asked before that because my hair was white when I was born. So it was, and all the rest of my family members have dark hair. So I thought that, like, people would ask me oftentimes, like, or I had got approached when I was in my 20s. My skin was clear and I was, just a bright, vibrant 20-year-old. And I had somebody approach me that said that they thought that they had contact with an elemental before, and they thought that I was one. And now, no, I was born on Earth. I don't have any, I'm not of a different universe or different time or anything like that. I think I have been reincarnated, but that's about as far as that. But it opens up a whole line of amazing fascination when it comes to the structure of our DNA.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting, and each of us has that ability to tune into what's on the other side of the veil, let's say, and it depends on where we are in our life on how we block that off. With some people block it off as you get older with science and religion, and that wall gets built out of those bricks. And then you don't see those things you saw when you were a kid anymore. But it doesn't mean they're not there and that you can't see them. You just have to open that thing back up again. So fascinating with Maybelle. Now, just to clarify my police brain here, when they were putting the cable in, they found her actual grave. They didn't find like a shallow grave where she was just stuffed. It was like
whatever was left of her was gone. There was nothing left. She was, we actually had pondered whether or not the stone had been moved over the course of time by nature. I'll share a picture of it later so that you can actually put it on the site with her name. It was a hand-carved stone, so you can tell she was indigent. They misspelled the word daughter. The G and the H weren't in it. So you can see that there was different levels of, they were trying to memorialize this girl. The honest to God truth is she could have been swept away in the water. I don't know if her body was actually there. I'm going to make the assumption that her family buried her there if they found her remains.
Oh, okay, fine. Yeah, so
or either the earth had taken her back completely. Now, there are bones and things that I did find on the property, but again, this is untouched area, untouched land, and I did place everything that I found into a small box and, made sure that it was with flowers on it and kept like a memorial.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Oh, good for you. So you grew up with a ghost and hanging out with her. I guess your teen years would have been very interesting. Trying to explain that to your friends.
They all knew. It was no surprise to anyone that when I wound up on television for the paranormal, I've been a witch since I was 12 years old. It wasn't, people were not surprised. People used to fear going to my house because of the ghost. And so it was a very widely known thing that my home was haunted with these entities. And there was also different situations where I felt like there was portals and doorways and things that had entered into my realm that invited different things that were almost unspoken of, like poltergeists and things like that. So I believe in objects holding energy. And I believe that if you, for example, let's say you love a necklace that your grandmother gave you, and you love it so much and you lose it one day, but then suddenly it finds you because it knows that it belongs to you. This object has the energy and the love of your grandmother. Some of the dolls and things that have been collected over the course of time that people fear now because they're falling apart and they're disintegrating have been overloved and over cherished so much that they seem like they're old people, and they seem scary to the whole other side of the world. But to me, that doll has been loved, and you can love the life into an object, and I truly believe that.
Well, yeah, that's a fascinating way of looking at the way that things exist, or material objects exist. And I know love energy I know love energy actually is energy because of that experiment they did with water years ago. Are you familiar with that one? There was two jugs of water. You're supposed to, and people hated one and loved the other one, and they actually had a different chemical base eventually, and one tasted really good and one tasted really crappy. And
is that, that they say make your food with love?
Yes.
Maybe that does really happen. Maybe we really do put and I know because I'm a horrible cook. Don't eat it but other people really love the art of cooking, and their food is just something that you go home thinking about and talking about, and it is, I believe that with all my heart.
Yeah, so note to self, don't go for lunch at Rachel's house. Okay. In your life, you've obviously seen things, and you got to a point, and our history got to a point where now we could come out and talk about this in a great open environment like on television. And you hit it right, in getting a group together and going out and doing investigations. What got you to sit down with some people and say, hey, you know what? I think we'd be good at this. People say their house is haunted. Let's go find out. How long ago was that for you?
Initially, 13 years ago, I put together a group. It was 3 females. It was myself, my sister, and a friend of mine. And I decided that I kind of wanted to see how females fared in the paranormal. And since then, we have separated and gone our separate ways, and done remarkably on our own with our own projects. But initially, I did want that sisterhood. I wanted that camaraderie. I was really glad for a really long time that I had that. I had a lot of really great positive experiences. And, of course, it was one of the requirements for the Paranormal Challenge. And that was a really great experience that led to a lot of really amazing opportunities in the paranormal.
What's the Paranormal Challenge?
Oh, the Paranormal Challenge, it was on the Travel Channel. It was hosted by Zach Bagans from the Ghost. Oh, no, be sorry. All right. It was they call it a flash in the pan, I think, in Hollywood. But it was one of those things that I think we were 3rd or 4th to be filmed, and we got pushed forward because we were the most dramatic type episode. Mm-hmm. But it wound up serving us with a lot of opportunities. Like, for example, trying to get into a historical location to do a paranormal investigation by phone, especially, is
good luck.
Comical. It's comical. So I've always, now with the experience, I've learned to twist my words a little bit and talk more about the history than the haunting. But that opened up a lot of opportunities for me because people thought that, that it would bring some, an audience to their location, which was really great. It was a great opportunity for me. So it opened up a lot of doors for me, and I was able to start going around to places that, would have been otherwise closed off to me. And that's when I started doing the true crime paranormal. And that was something I was like, I just want to do something different. And I want to search for the females that weren't found during these cases that were never solved. And so I embarked as a team of 2 with my best friend for 4 or 5 years in the pursuit of this true crime paranormal. And it was wonderful. And we had a great time. And we came up with a lot of really great evidence. And, you know, we couldn't have done it without each other at the time. And so, you know, everybody evolves in their own way. Now I've evolved into a solo, not team, I guess. It's a team of 1. And I've decided that I'm going to go a little bit more extreme and macabre, and a little bit more than I could ask anybody else to join me for. The only things that you'll be seeing in the near future where people will actually be with me, unless they're attending an event, is a camera person or the location owner. And I'm going to kind of take these challenges on myself and go into these places and see what I can kind of manifest and conjure up on my own as a single individual.
Okay, when you say a little more macabre, what do you mean?
So I am diving into the forensics a little bit. So I would be looking for bodies or trace evidence of blood biomaterial. And also, when you're doing these high crime, high profile situations where, you know, as an officer, as a retired officer, you're going into places that are, you know, dangerous. So these females weren't taken from a city in paradise and killed. They were taken from the ghetto and they were killed. And I'm going back down there and I'm trying to retrace steps, and I'm trying to talk to family members. I'm trying to talk to anybody that has relation or anything that they could give me some more information on these individuals. And I have been working with the police on a few of the cases. So it's brought me to a really unique place, but I want to push the envelope, and I think that I'll be able to do that freely on my own.
Now, I've talked to a lot of people who help police in finding bodies, reopening files, dead files, helping the government locate missing, in one case, a missing submarine. They have the forensics people working with them. They don't have to have a forensic background. If you're going out looking for biological material, you'll need to understand
what I'm looking. Yes,
well, I do. What you're looking for, but what you're looking for, but how long it takes to degrade, overlapping of blood, how to take a sample,
right.
And then if
I do all that.
If this is going to go to court, you're going to have to be able to understand the chain of evidence and packaging. So,
yes,
and you know how to do all that?
Yes, I do. So I can't do a chemiluminescence test without somebody else being there, as you know, because of the amount of hands that are needed in that very short period of time.
Yeah.
So some of these things I will have a camera person for to be able to help me. Preserving and packaging, I'm actually going to create little forensic science kits for individuals that are going out and kind of doing the same thing. And let's say, for example, my Freetown State Forest, where the girl was giving me longitude, latitude directions, and then getting to the point where you see something valid to the description that was given to you by audio from the entity, and then going through and kind of exacting the space. And there's several different ways that you can actually see, even just by sight alone. And you know this as an officer, I'm sure, that the grass grows differently over a place where a dead body is buried. Things smell different, flowers grow differently. And so we're not always able to exactly say whether or not we found a body, but I sometimes feel a greater sense of peace. And sometimes I feel a great sense of dread also. Yeah. Knowing that there's something close, and it's sometimes I'm in a forest and I feel like it's right there. I'm stepping over it. But then again, if you look at the Ted Bundy case, for example, the officer that found the bodies actually tripped over one of the bodies. So it was like, you really have to kind of be hand in hand looking for this. And sometimes we're never going to be able to discernibly 100% say whether or not that person is there. So I don't generally, when I work with the police, I ask them for what they have to give me for evidence. They're not asking me for mine. They're not asking me to turn in a clean tissue swab of biomaterial. They're not asking me for that. That's something I'm doing on my own. And when I ask people for help, I'm asking for a better sense of where I can find this person, their habits, the things that they did in life, questions to ask their ghost to bring me closer to who they are. So when I say working with the police, in no way do I mean that I'm on this mission to solve these cases. I'm on a mission to personally get involved with these spirits that are lost and their murders have been unsolved. And I've actually had a female scream the name of the murderer a year before the police found out that that's who killed them. So it was a very powerful answer. And it didn't have to go to America. It didn't have to go to the police. It didn't have to go to court, because it was my validation. It was something that made me feel as though I had a special connection with an intelligent spirit, and let her know that people still do care. Some of these cases are only buried like that because of budget reasons. And we all know that that's a sad, unfortunate fact. When you are a prostitute, or when you are a person that not everybody's gonna be like, oh, well, she was out there living her own life. We're not really gonna be that concerned. And, things happen to them. So we have to kind of be the kinder individual and go through, tell the person's story. This person didn't just become a prostitute and die. They were mothers. They were daughters. They were people. They had a favorite cereal. They went to school once. They had dreams. And so my whole plight with the true crime is to really let you know from the victim's standpoint who they were in life. They should not die being a victim. They spent one day of their life being murdered. I want to know what they were doing for the rest of their lives.
In speaking to the psychic detectives, psychic investigators in the past, they've all come up with, there's going to be, this is how the person died. This is where the body will be found. And the police will say, oh, great, we'll go out and get it. But a lot of times they'll tell the policeman, no, you won't, because it's not in your path. This person's remains will be found by a couple out walking in years from now, because it's in their path, in their lives, to be the ones to find the body. Marianne Morgan, for example, a lady who was killed, murdered in Nevada, she could see the body. She could see this kind of playground toy swing little merry-go-round beside it, and this one-story blue building, and says, yeah, that's where the body's going to be found. And the police said, oh, we'll have to go try to find that building. And she said, no, don't worry about it. You won't find her. It's going to be a couple out walking in a couple of years. Sure enough, a couple out walking, the lady sat down, take a break, sat on this woman's skull, and called the police. And it was an old motel that had shut down, and it was the robin egg blue out with the kid's toy in the side, exactly what she had described 2 years earlier. But she said, yeah, it's not that policeman's, it's not in that person's path, their life. Same with a murderer up in Canada. They totally identified them. They said, hey, you've got this person, you've already talked to the guy. And when you arrest him, this is what he's going to look like. And they did a sketch. But they said, okay, great, let's go find him. Nope, it's going to be 10 years from now. And sure enough, it was 10 years later. They had already talked to the murderer. He lived a few hundred yards away from where the woman was killed, but he was only like 16, 17, 18 or 19 at the time. But when he got arrested, he looked exactly like the drawing. But at the time, he didn't.
Oh, you got me in the feels. Oh, whoa. That is
yeah.
My heart stopped.
So kind of keep a heads up for that. If you're helping somebody out there looking for someone, you may not find them because it's not in your path.
Absolutely. Wow. That is a powerful, powerful thing. And I do think it's the same with that. And it's the opposite of that. Sometimes it is in our path, and we've put ourselves on this very narrow line. And I know that it seems like our community is so big because we're so saturated, but really, like, I'll talk to other people about the paranormal and they're like, what the hell are you talking about? So we're kind of on this path. I don't know. It's like when you're a kid and you want to, what do you want to do when you grow up? Like, what stirs that emotion? Like, what makes you happy, And I always find that this is just such a level of fascination. It's a learning curve. It's a process. And we're never going to 100% be exact, but the effort is there. The effort to make the connection with these women is there. And it's 100% for me, an honor, a privilege to even be in the presence of an individual that is able to build up enough strength to have a conversation with me after the traumatic experience that was the end of her life.
Oh, and you're going to find out, and once you get going on this, and I'm going to give you a heads up what's going to happen, you're going to have dead people standing at the foot of your bed. Natalie Holloway showed up at the foot of my friend's bed saying, soaking wet, saying, my dad's going to call you, I'm dead.
Oh my
2 days later, Natalie Holloway's dad phoned Marianne and said, hey, could you come down and help look? We're in Aruba. Can you come down and look for the body? And she said, oh, funny you should say that. Your daughter showed up 2 days ago. But she didn't connect who it was until, the dad called, and then they hit the media and stuff. So she was down in Aruba and said, well, that's the guy who, you guys know who did this. Unfortunately, right. He's not going to be arrested, but he will get, he'll get his up, he'll get it in the end, and you'll never find Natalie because she's with, and she describes Natalie Holloway as being with thousands of others. It wasn't that he killed thousands of others, but she was at the bottom of the ocean in the Caribbean, which is filled with dead people who died in shipwrecks and over the centuries. So that's where she was. But she showed up at her bed. And same with, Rodriguez. I can't remember her first name. The entire crew and all the passengers from the Malaysian flight showed up in her house.
Oh, boy.
Because she was crossing them over, and they all showed up because they wanted, and she couldn't figure out why her out of everyone else. And it was the next day she found about the flight, but an entire soaking wet group of people came through, and she knows where the flight is. We talked about it the year after the flight went down. We talked about where it was, but no one paid. They're not ready to be found yet, but it's on a shelf in Rodriguez Island in the Indian Ocean, which is a completely different place when it looked. Anyway, but they will come to you when they know that you are somebody who can now put the puzzle pieces together. They'll start showing up.
Right. And I believe highly in quantum entanglement, which sounds like what the case was with her, with all these individuals where she wasn't really sure. There is an invisible thread, like a fishing line, that leads us to each other. And it's not always per individual. It's sometimes it's groups of people where there are these lines that you don't see that lead us to one another. And it's an entanglement process, much like if you saw a spider web and how it all connects together.
Yes. And that's how other people have described the universe, is like us, our individual pieces in the universe. We're all connected by these little threads. We're talking to Rachel Hoffman. You can go to her Facebook page, Paranormal Xpeditions, with an X, not an E. And also she's got another one up, True Crime Paranormal. Rachel is on her own now, doing investigations and having a lot of fun, and has a cunning plan on putting together some other things. You were talking briefly, you mentioned something you did at Freetown State Forest. What was that about, Rachel?
So what I did was I was looking for the New Bedford Highway murder, which was an unsolved case that happened. And what wound me up in the Freetown State Forest was, I believe that was the dumping grounds.
Okay.
For the bodies. And so I went in there and I started, just doing general EVPs and some, longitude, latitude stuff. And I wound up being guided by one of the ghosts that, and they actually said knows. Now, one of the suspects in the murders was a man named Flat-Nosed DeGrazia. And his real name is Anthony, but being that these people knew him by his nickname, she actually called him by his nickname. So it was alarming. And I actually will share the video in a little bit because it was caught on film. And it was explosively just so much stuff at the same time. And followed by these females, there was 12, and they're calling themselves out by name. Like, they're calling themselves out by their name and saying who they are. Like, who's with us? You know what I mean? And then there's an intelligent response following right after. So that was one of the most amazing experiences that I had with, coming close to somebody that I actually felt as though was intelligent and giving me true answers to the questions in a timely manner.
Oh, that's fascinating. And this was all an area where a specific, was it a serial killer, or was this like a dumping ground for the mob?
He was a serial killer. Sadly, though, for some reason, this specific area, the Freetown State Forest, seemed to be a place where a lot of bodies dumped. And it was because you can actually walk into the forest and get lost. It's so deep and so dark, you could definitely see how a body could be out there and not be found. I spent the entire summer out there. So it wasn't like I just went for an overnight investigation and came back. I literally spent 3 months of my life in that forest, getting eaten alive, at the threat of people that were there doing suspicious things and all the other things that come with trying to get to the bottom of it. And I spent a lot of time out there. I felt very connected to each one of these women. I spoke to the officer that found most of the bodies. So I felt as though this was a mission of mine, and it was a great beginning for me because I had immediate access to the forest. It was really never closed off. I mean, if you go in there, they really don't bother you unless you're bothering other people. The Freetown State Forest was known for high levels of activity, such as northern lights. Bigfoot was another one. This is in the heart of the Bridgewater Triangle. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Bridgewater Triangle.
No, what is the Bridgewater Triangle for my listener?
Okay, it's about 200 triangular, I guess, feet of haunting that mimics almost the Bermuda Triangle. And it's an area in the state of Massachusetts, and it kind of has its borders. So for some reason within the borders of this Bridgewater Triangle happens to have a high level of activity, northern lights, Bigfoot, UFOs, all kinds of different types of activity, Pukwudgie. These were all Native American burial grounds, and that's the site of the Wampanoag Native American trails out there. And so we believe, for the most part, that a lot of it's cursed. Profile Rock is out there, and the nose fell off of Profile Rock about 2 years ago. And it was a big thing in the paranormal community because it's a site that a lot of us like to go. Spider Gates is out there. Just, it's the birthplace of America. So Agawam is a very popular spot, the site of the King Philip's War. And the unique thing about being in the history aspect of things and around the city of Boston and around Massachusetts itself is it's based off of, that's where the birthplace of America was. So you're going to be able to find Paul Revere. He's buried in the middle of the city there. You could take ghost tours and haunts and everything. And you can actually, everything you walk on is tainted with history and hauntings throughout the whole area. But specifically, this one area, the Bridgewater Triangle, had been cited multiple number of times. And if you do like a little Google research, you'll be able to see, multiple number of people that have gone out there and caught some phenomenal evidence. There's one guy that just collects poop from the area because he's trying to show the digestive process of the cryptoids that live out there.
Oh, that's interesting.
It is, because if you think about it scientifically, you are going to leave some kind of, if you're a hunter, a lot of people know that you're going to look for scat, you're going to look for the markings on the trees, you're going to look for the claw prints that are common with, let's say, a bear, a tiger, a lion, all those things. But then, again, cryptoids have their own typical behaviors and typical things that they do. So signs that they would leave, marks that they would make. And so everybody has a really unique kind of perspective when it goes into going into the forest, collecting evidence, because we're all there for different realms of the paranormal. It's not always just ghosts. It can be a broad range of things. UFOology. Spit that out.
It sounds like my neighborhood, because where I live, it's UFOs, Bigfoot, and forest and places where you could dump bodies.
Oh God.
Yeah, there's a park here. It's called Stanley Park. It's a huge multi-acre location, but it's filled with dead people. Going back hundreds of years. It's an old burial ground, and then it was a place you'd go dump a murder victim. And a lot of cities, LA is full of places like that. Even Griffith, where they conservated Griffith Park, very, very haunted area. A lot of these local forests and things like that. Devil's Tramping Ground in North Carolina is one of them. There's one in Massachusetts that's just filled with bodies too. They're all over the place, and anywhere that people have access to with nice roads, they'll be able to just get rid of a body really quick. It used to be, and I live on the coast too. You can dump them in the water, but eventually somebody's gonna find them. A lot of times, unless you tie them down, and even then they have a tendency of popping back up. But and a lot of these places are places of spiritual activity over and above. It's almost like the murderer has the corpse, and something is leading them to a place of higher vibration to take the corpse to. It's not like randomly, I'm going to kill this person. Now what do I do? Subconsciously, they're going to take them to a place where that body is going to be, basically deteriorating in the forest. But there's something in the forest that's going to look after it.
Absolutely. And I know that there are some cases where there are dumping grounds, and it doesn't always mean that the person was murdered in that location. It just means that their body is dumped. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly it. It's just a disposal site for the meat sack, and where the actual being itself, where the energy goes, that energy could be staying around at the location it was murdered, and hanging out there until you show up at the body, and then a lot of times it zips over, going, "Hey, you're standing right beside me. How did you find me?" It was just, it's fascinating, that whole idea on the other side where time is flat, not linear, and they can be in multiple places at once. Absolutely. And it's well, you know this from going to a cemetery. Why would you be a ghost in a cemetery? But read the name off a tombstone, and you'll get something. It's like they show up going, "Who are you? Who just called me?"
Like they don't, that dimension doesn't really have a time. But that's another interesting thing about DNA and memory, knowing that somebody's entire DNA structure is in a piece of mitochondrial hair that falls off your body, that you can actually test and say discernibly that, you're the father. Hey, this person killed this person. Hey, that we actually have the entire code for our entire genetic makeup and the strand of our hair, should be able to lend the possibility that everywhere that we shed a cell on the face of this earth, we could possibly be haunting or touching or leaving a memory. Yeah.
But DNA's interesting. I had to go out and do it was almost like not exactly like the Joseph Wambaugh book called The Bleeding. I think it was called The Bleeding, or The Blooding, where they went out and got everyone in town's DNA to basically see if they were the rapists, and it was all voluntary. We actually had one of those in Canada, and my ex was a reporter and covered it.
Wow. Actually, that would be, not to say that it would be right from the get-go, but I think at birth they should be doing that. I mean, for our protection, too. If you think about it, they have to go back and find sometimes, they have to go back and find a close relative to prove that an individual isn't an individual, because there's not enough of us on the earth that proves that person is who's laying on the ground. So sometimes I think it would be really good.
It would be easy. It makes life easy, but when you're an infant, you don't really have consent.
And you don't have. And it's all about the rights situation. But if they broaden it into, this is for you, not against you. And I think, there's going to be people uprising with. Yeah,
I would. But that's like, it's like, hold on, that's mine. Yes, but now we know who.
Hey, you don't want that. Yeah. No.
And what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
Oh, now we have all the ginger-haired people. We are going to get rid of them. Oh, damn.
army of gingers.
Army of gingers. We need more gingers. Anyway, and like we had to go out and get, and it's always voluntary. You get people that volunteer. We had a lot of home invasions, a lot of DNA, a lot of murders, and we had to go out and ask we had Crime Stoppers giving us hundreds of names. So we went, okay, let's go ask everybody for DNA. They can say no, but we're only going to compare it against the stuff we have. And of course, everybody who didn't do it agreed to it. And those ones that refused, then we looked at them a little bit harder. But yeah, it's very, very interesting. But DNA is not an easy thing. You can't really get it from the strand of the hair. You get it from the bulb of the hair.
Right.
But when you're actually taking DNA from a crime scene, the processes of doing that is a little bit complicated too. And then once you've taken it, what do you put it in? Don't put it in a plastic bag. You put it in a paper bag. You take it from point A to point B. That's the other thing too, is while you're out there poking around and you find like the shin bone sticking up out of the ground, you're now at a murder scene. And me as a policeman, I might get a little bit choked if you started digging around my homicide scene that I didn't even know I had.
That same situation kind of happened at the Victorian Mansion in Gardner when the pelvic bone of a small girl was found in the basement.
Okay.
And so, of course, during that time, I mean, if you found something recognizable to human remains, I think that would be a really good time to stop everything that you're doing and to report to the authorities. But much like going around and treasure hunting and looking for things, we often find things, in the forest. And truthfully, they weren't looking for it there anyway. I found what I found by way of a method that a lot of people don't find is reasonable. Hey, a ghost told me that her body might be over here, so can you guys meet me over there, at noon tomorrow? So they might think I'm a little bit insane, but should I find something tangible, then...
because there are laws about monkeying around with human remains.
Oh yeah, and I would never want.
But then again, you don't know it's a human remain until you pull that piece of bone out and realize there's a shoe on the bottom of it.
Right. Yeah, and some of them are just shards of material. It's not really discernible. I know that I have a couple friends that are really, really lucky. They'll go out into the forest and they'll find like deer heads and antlers and everything. And I'll be lucky if I find a cool looking stick, So, but there are people out there that have a natural sense of ability to look for things like that. And I think, because we're out there looking for it, if we find it, then it's an honor. Like I said, it's an honor to be even a part of the history of somebody being found that it was missing.
Yeah, it's like you're being gifted that. It's a very First Nations way of putting it. You're being gifted the opportunity to intertwine with that person's path.
Right. And I already do feel as though, I spent the entire summer out there, and every day I would go, I would find their graves one day, which weren't in the Freetown State Forest, of course. I would go down to the areas where I knew that there was a possibility that they were picked up, for whatever reason, for a ride, for whatever they were doing. One girl went to the store for milk. So having a predator out there, knowing that no one's going to look for these women that have been, on the streets previous, let's say, and let's say somebody changed their life, they decided that was no longer for them, and they went out and they wound up getting kidnapped just on their way to the store. So a lot of these cases were, a lot of these people were saying, she was clean, there was nothing going on with her, so I'm really confused. But there is, in the mind of a serial killer, expendability when it comes to people that don't go missing and nobody goes looking for them. There's a higher level of chance of them getting away with what they've done.
Yeah, that was the fellow that was doing the serial killing, a guy named Robert Picton. He preyed on sex trade workers here in Vancouver, British Columbia. And he would take them back to, he lived on a dirt farm, literally a place where you would take loads of dirt from other locations and grind it up into smaller amounts. And then it would go to fill different construction sites. And he had a trailer and shed built on that. And he would go and buy pigs, and he'd buy 6 pigs, bring them back, butcher them, get all their entrails, put them in 45-gallon drums, and take them down to a rendering plant. But when we were following him around, we had a suspicion he was actually taking parts of the women there too, but we weren't really sure.
Mixing them. Oh,
so he also ground them up, some of them into the dirt that was then sent off. And we followed him around for about 3 months. And finally, we got told, since, hey, you don't have a body, you don't have any other evidence other than some hearsay and a witness that wasn't really a witness. And they're all missing from the city of Vancouver. You guys are in the city of Port Coquitlam, which is like half an hour, 45 minutes away. Vancouver police don't have any interest in this guy. We've got, 6 murders outstanding here where we have families coming to the front counter saying what's going on. But we knew he cut up a sex trade worker the year before. We were following him. So anyway, we got told to stop. Vancouver weren't interested. And then we did a search warrant a couple of years later. And that's when we found body parts and belongings and things like that, and which turned his property into an archaeological dig that went on for months. It was the largest crime scene in Canadian history. And he got convicted, I think, of killing 22 of the 50-some people he killed. But it was really sad for us because those 22 people went missing after we got told to stop following him. That changed the course of investigations, and it started a huge thing called the Missing, Murdered, and Women's Task Force, and it was to deal with Aboriginal women across Canada. So we've always said, we in the woo community talk about it as being how many people had to die before the government created this huge inquiry and task force that's changing the way missing women, missing and murdered Indigenous women are investigated, and right back to the band, the tribe, like you would call them tribes here, how the culture of reporting kids walking off, leaving the reserves because they were sexually abused at 13 and nobody paying attention to them, and they end up on the other side of the country as street workers, as sex trade workers, and how that's handled, and more psychological support and psychiatric support on the reserve itself, or the bands. How many people had to die before that switch got turned on, and it benefits hundreds of thousands of people across the country? Well, if 5 people were murdered, no. If 10 people were murdered, maybe. So at 22, that was it. So we look at the women who died as coming into this life knowing that they were going to give their lives at this point for the greater good.
Right.
So you look at them as like their souls as the heroes that had changed, helped change for the future of everyone else. So that kind of way of looking at it. They sacrificed, but they knew coming into this life, this is what they're going to do. Not obviously as humans, but their soul knew this is what the sole purpose was.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. And when you're dealing with serial killers, too, it's one of the guys I worked with, his university, his thesis was on serial killers, and interviewed some of the crazy serial killers that were still in prison. So it was very, very interesting. And actually working on the file itself was, it was uncomfortable, and it was... and again, in hindsight, I had no idea what an empath was, or I knew I could see dead people all my life, but I didn't know at the time what all these feelings were that I was feeling, even standing on his property or getting close to it or standing beside him, like in doing surveillance. So I didn't look like a policeman. I looked like some goofy guy standing around hanging out with him. So it was kind of creepy. And now in hindsight, I understand why I was feeling that creepiness that you probably feel when you're standing in a forest full of dead people. But you get it 10 times worse than I do.
I think sometimes empathically, like when we are amongst people that, and also knowing these women's history and knowing that their children were left behind and knowing that their mothers were left grieving. And I mean, it adds an element of gut-wrenching emotion to the table. You know, it really does. You're in someone else's shoes in the place where someone else took their last breath, and it can be powerful. And again, like I keep saying, it is an honor to be out there to talk to these people. And I know I've spoken to a lot of their families, and since the case was unsolved for so long, and there is that element of a grace period in the paranormal that you want to take before you embark on, you know, not somebody in your own family's, you know, haunting. So it can be a touchy situation if you do something before 10 years, or, you know, people are like, why are you meddling in their business? It's their family. But as far I've noticed that they, the family members, especially of these unsolved crimes, they want to take investigation. They want to be there. They want to listen and hear families' voices and see if they can't make us questions. And I always, while I'm out there, will ask spirits if they have any other questions or if they have anything to say to their families. It's really like the closure that a lot of people never have received, especially with the nature of the person coming up missing, and for years they weren't aware of what was going on with them.
Do you know, when you find these people, when you find the dead and they come to you and you then introduce the family members to the dead, and after that's all done, do you find that the ghost, we'll call it a ghost, leaves, crosses over?
No, I've never. For me, I've never had an experience with crossing over or asking a ghost to cross over, because I don't know that I have the power to do that. I'm not saying that other people don't have the power to bring peace to a spirit and no longer wants to be dwelling here. I just in months have never had that, and most of this I know are lingering, and you know, I don't know that they're unhappy being here. I think that we had discussed that before, where, you know, the popular opinion is that they're stuck here and that they don't want to be here. And I think that life changes. It morphs. We become dehydrated people. And life just looks a lot different for us. Is it awful? Is it bad? Is it unbearable? I don't think it's any of those things. I think we're just in a different form. Not to say that there isn't a place to cross over, but I have looked and seen, I passed away myself. And I had, me and my sister, Danielle, who was actually part of Paranormal Xpeditions, had an experience, and we both happened to quickly die. And it was interesting because her experience is my experience. My experience was very unique and very different from anybody that I had ever heard or seen. And I think some of what was going on with me in the physical world with people trying to bring me back to life was also interfering with my perception of life and death. So because people were fighting for me to stay alive, I had interference of machines and things and noises that I wouldn't hear if I was just dying of natural causes in the woods somewhere.
What was your experience? What did you feel? Or can you remember?
I can remember. So I was zapped back into a place that I never was, and I was standing in the middle of the street, and I was having a conversation with one of my ex's sisters, and it was just a strange, could have been so real. And then suddenly I heard a noise, and it sounded like, and all I saw in me was a pink card and a green card spinning towards me. And all of a sudden they were so quick that noise, that line, like, all of a sudden that's what it came. And I'm guessing it was because I died and that was me flatlining. So again, that interference could have played a part in my life after death experience and coming back. You know, part of that human interference could have been my perception. Where my sister, when she passed, she saw nothing but darkness. So, and came back, you know, and she talked about her experiences and things like that. And so I think for each individual, it's different. And it's not that I don't believe in God or I don't believe in heaven or any of those things. I didn't see enough or experience enough in that very short period of time. Thank God it wasn't longer. But I didn't experience enough in that short period of time to discernibly say that that was my experience.
Okay. And did you find after you came back from that, your abilities, your clairs were cranked up a bit?
Everything was on a higher vibration level. I was grateful for life. Food was amazing. I just didn't know, like I was clamoring for, like that experience. It definitely changed the way I see things, and it changed the knowledge that it could be there and gone at any time. So mentally, it changed me, and I continue to just keep a clear head and make sure that I'm, on a clear path and right with everybody around me as best I can be, because it is a fragile thing.
Did Danielle change too? Did she start seeing things?
She didn't start seeing things. She's extremely skeptical, and because even though it was a short-term experience, because she was, because hers was darkness, I mean, it does cause you to believe that maybe there isn't anything past when you shut your eyes, Yeah. So it's very individual.
It is. It is. I have a friend of mine. We actually cross people over, and we do it all around the world. She does it remotely, and we found over the years that there's 4 reasons people don't cross over, and one is a religious fear. They coveted their neighbor's wife. Therefore, oh heck, that's a 10 commandment break. I'm going to go to hell because I didn't think there was anything actually going to be here. And then I died, and there's like my great grandmother coming through saying, "Oh, you can come." And it's like, "Oh crap, no, hold on, I did something wrong. I'm going to stay here." And there's that, and then there's children who it's literally like I always say, it's stranger danger when their great grandmother comes through and they've never met them. They're like, "No, I'm going to wait for mom and dad." So they're going to hang out. They're in the hospitals. That's why hospitals have so many kids in them, and they'll come home with you if you're a cute little kid in the hospital, and they'll end up coming home and they'll be hanging out at your school. It's because they just don't want to go. They don't know what they're confused. Then there's the ones who think that they still have stuff to do. That's why you get nurses in hospitals. You get there's a guy here in Vancouver, British Columbia, in a theater that fell off scaffolding back in the day, and he was an electrician. He's still working on the electrical in the place because he's not finished yet. I had a Chinese carpenter come home with me standing at the foot of my bed, and he was his it's because I didn't clear myself properly. Anyway, long story. But always clear yourself when you leave a haunted place. But he was building. He had a toy he was making for his kid. So, and the other one is they don't know they're dead.
Yeah,
so
that's a popular.
Those are the 4, but the easiest ones we cross over are the ones with the religious issues, so we can get them going. But those are the 4 reasons I found. You'll find a dead person because they're jumping up and down saying, "Hey, look over here, I'm dead." That's unfinished business. They're not finished telling you that they were murdered by Bob. Right. So they're not leaving until they get somebody's attention and doing that. And then they'll find. And my understanding is the quote-unquote light, it's always there. They just have to pay attention and find it. It never goes away, so they can cross. It's just that there's a reason for them to be here, and that reason may be just to get your attention and to point out that this is where I am and this is why I want your attention here, and you've got to tell somebody, you got to tell my parents that I'm under the rock, that kind of thing. So they're going to keep doing that. They're not going to cross over until they get that attention done because they're pissed, basically. Yeah. But those are the...
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's noisy here. I've actually had an experience with that. I researched a case. It was Peter Porco in Rochester, and it was a case of time-delayed death. And what happened was he was actually mortally wounded by his son, who later wound up being put in prison for it. But he was mortally wounded, and while he was mortally wounded and bleeding out from this mortal wound, he actually wrote a check, did the dishes, made a pot of coffee, got the mail. So he was very much going through the motions of his everyday life as he was dying. And I know for the statements of the police officers, it was quite disturbing to them to have seen this level of activity from somebody that was actually passing away slowly.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it was incredible. And he was writing a check to the son that murdered him. And he was murdered over that check, over denying to give him that money. So it was a very interesting aspect.
Wow. So the son cashed a check? Anyway, that was fascinating. But when you were dealing with, so you dealt with the spirit of the man?
No, I didn't. But when I researched the whole process, what happened was I noticed that the police were going through the actual crime scene. And when they were going through it, sorry, these kids are really loud.
Just shake them.
I know. I'm trying to run away from the noise. Somebody took my plug for my RV, so it's a madhouse here. I'm sorry. I'm looking for another plug. I have a tiny home with 50 plugs. So this would be no problem in my bus, but I just don't have a plug. Is that it? Sorry.
That's okay.
They're not even mine. So basically it was, that was one of the most interesting cases to me, because it showed a person that was pretty much clinically dead, going about his everyday activities in life.
Oh yeah, and that's weird to me. I know that they're, you look at people during wartime where they get mortally wounded and can still run 100 yards, drive a car, pilot a plane, drive a tank, for a couple of hours, but they should have been dead, a week ago. No, they should have been dead when they got hit, but the adrenaline goes. And I remember training films. There was one we had of a guy who killed 2 policemen in the States because it just was where it was. And one policeman emptied their gun into the guy, but he kept coming. And he strangled her on a bed and killed her. And then her partner came in and then it shot him, emptied his gun at the guy. And every one of those bullets, maybe other than one, would have been a fatal bullet. But his adrenaline and his drive and that focus kept him moving. So when he did die, he had, I don't know, how many rounds into him, 20-some rounds into him or something like that. But yeah, it was. And he had killed one and was coming at the other one, and then he finally just collapsed. But not every round was a fatal wound around, but it, so you were taught, yes, just because you shot somebody doesn't mean that like they're on TV and they'll fall over. They'll keep coming, and they'll still operate, and they'll still be mentally functioning and things. And we die. The only reason a human being dies it's the only reason is lack of blood to the brain. And as long as there's blood circulating through your head, you are going to stay alive. And everything else is going to shut down eventually. But when things shut down, it just stops the heart from pumping blood to your brain, and your brain dies. So if that heart is still going and you've got that blood moving through you, you're going to go, and then your brain's going to control the rest of your muscles, and you're going to keep going. So it's a spooky thing. Death is it's either very hard to kill a person or very easy. A friend of mine's fiance was in a real minor car accident. He got hit from the side, and her head literally is shook a little bit to the left, and that bone that connects your top of your spine to your skull came loose and just broke. Where the term is breaking your neck, but it's actually popping your skull off of that bone that connects to the upper spine. And people said, well, she must have hit her head on the window and knocked herself out, because people who saw the accident, there was almost no damage to her car, but it was just a fluky way she had positioned her head, and she died. So, life is fragile, but I've seen people that have gone through multiple like a huge car accident, and it's amazing that they got up and walked away. So it comes down to it's just your time.
Yeah.
You're going to go.
And look at those people that have, I mean, how many accidents? Like there's some people that I know that never gotten in an accident their whole lives. And there's people that you know that gotten 15 accidents. And it's like, you must have a tribe of angels and heaven
working full time, and they're tired. Every time you leave your house, all the angels are going, "Oh crap, not again."
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting to know that you've died, though, because that's very, very common in intuitive people. The lady Skeeter that we cross over people with, she's died 5 times. And every time she dies, she comes back. Well, and Marianne Morgan, she's died, I think, 5 or 6 times, 7 times too. Every time they come back, they're cranked up.
Yeah.
Other people have an ascension, certain points in their life without actually having to, reboot. So, and luckily I'm one of those guys. I'll have an ascension every so often, but when I'm ready, but I don't have to check out to do it.
Yeah.
Knock on wood. Yeah, but it's good. It's good that you had your one, and hopefully you'll just have the minor ones from now on.
Yeah, no, yeah. I don't know about the experiences that other people have. I know sometimes people with a lot of health concerns that wind up going back in and out of the hospital. I see that they can actually sense when someone in a room or in the hall with them has passed, because they've passed so many times themselves. So they have this unique sensibility. I know people that wind up chronically in hospitals and things like that, they're intuitive. They know,
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I've told my listener this before, but I've actually had to go to those scenes where, I haven't heard from Uncle Bob. Can you go check on him? And you go there, and there's like flies on the inside of the window, which is a clue. And you go in, and Uncle Bob's dead. And there are times where I have, and I probably had to do that once every 2 months when I was working in this place up north. And there are times where I would talk to the dead person. And I would talking to him like he's there as I'm going through all the stuff, like the belongings, checking the cabinet, writing, making notes of all the medication the guy was on. Was there a DNR or do not resuscitate order on the fridge, like when a magnet sick, going through all my notes, taking the photographs and waiting for body removal. And there are other times I'd go and wouldn't say a thing. And then in hindsight, I had this pointed out to me by a psychic. She said, "You notice that you were talking to some dead people and other people you weren't?" And I said, "Yeah, that's weird. How, do you know that?" She said, "You knew something's still there. Their ghost was there. The ones you didn't talk to, they'd crossed over. And you just knew it. You sensed that the other one was standing there saying, like, what are you doing to my body?" And I was explaining everything I did. I was talking to them like I was like they were alive, and I was describing why I was doing things, why I was looking through the drawers, why I was writing all this stuff down. And other ones, it would just be doing it.
That's very respectful of you.
Yeah, and I thought it was too, but then I found out later that it was actually because I knew they were there. And I had seen dead people as a kid, but it was funny, the times that I was actually experiencing a whack of dead humans standing over top of dead people, I didn't see the ghost. But when I was a kid, I could see ghosts. So it was like that was turned off while I was actually in a job where I was hanging out with dead people, actual dead bodies. Mm-hmm. I wasn't plugged into that. So it was like whoever was guiding me said, "You know what, we're going to cut you some slack. You don't need this right now. This job, it'll come later." So that was kind of cool. That is again, awesome.
I mean, experience is very individual.
Yes, it is. Have you ever gone to a place like Gettysburg and the battlefields?
Yes, I was actually part of the first Gettysburg Battlefield Bash. I want to say it was a decade ago now. Jesus. And I got the experience of being there on the night of the blue moon. And from the time that I went, now I don't necessarily, I'm not the big person that sees it, but I saw something only to be described as Banicula. And it was the first thing that crossed my path when I went into Gettysburg. And it almost caused me to crash my car. So I stopped. I wound up staying right on the site where Battlefield is, and it's the close hotel and convention center to the arena, and I'm to the Hoffman Mansion in several places. And I brought my equipment everywhere, and the sense around the area is they can name their bullets, they can name their vests, very highly intelligent. I wound up at the Hoffman Mansion, which is a field hospital.
Yep.
And I have this really strange fear of losing my limbs. And I never knew where it came from, never had any, even now, if I lost my leg, you learn to live with it, but it was just that I had. Coming into the Hoffman Mansion, I found out that it was a field hospital where they would actually remove people's legs, arms, and things like that, and basically throw them out the window into the field to save their lives, to save them from experiencing things like gangrene. And so I almost felt like a flashback, perhaps, that these people could have been along my line of relation and experienced these horrific situations. But is, if you haven't been there, man, you gotta go.
There, with the Dongos, Paul, is it Tom Dongo? One of the, can't remember the names now, their first names, but they're a couple of, the son was been on a lot of TV series, ghost kind of stuff, and the dad was, he was a policeman too at one point. But we were poking around there. Went to a field hospital at a farm, and that was interesting. That was busy. That was like you standing there in an empty farmhouse, not a farmhouse, but in an empty barn with the feeling that you're in a crowd, like standing there and you just can't move. That was the feeling you had in a full-on empty room. It had a really low ceiling, I remember that. And also you looked at it through a full spectrum lens, and you could see like weird marks on the ceiling, and it was like really weird stuff. But I think it was just old paint and stuff like that. But it was just sort of creepy. That was creepy. But you said vernacular, so that's like a vampire rabbit thing.
It is, and I have to say I don't usually bring that up into the conversation, but it was my first experience upon passing into the Gettysburg battlefield where I almost crashed my vehicle. I drive a Ford F-150. So I was, pulling in, and it wasn't just me that saw it. And of course, I'll break for a bird because I'm, I love animals. But so I, of course, swerved my vehicle, and everybody's like, "What the hell are you doing?" It was black with a red eye. And it was fast. But the part that was really amazing is the field was completely open where the bunny could have run, and there was no bunny rabbit. It was mind-boggling. So that was like, woo, great way to start the experience at Gettysburg. And it didn't disappoint from then on out. I mean, again, we are empaths. We're going into a place where we know the history of America was built. Lives were lost in horrific manners. People's limbs were blown off, and it adds to that element of sadness and emotion. But on top of that, all that, it's like, I believe that when someone is murdered, it leaves like a scar in the universe. And it's like a scar that's lingering. And so every time you pass through or pass over that little realm, you're passing through the pain, you're passing through the sadness, and you're passing through the scar that's always there. It never goes away. So is it intelligent? No, I wouldn't say that. Is it residual? I don't even know if I could say that, because it's a stain that never goes away.
I think sometimes that may occur too with suicides.
Yes, I believe that too, heavily. And especially because most people that I've had the experience with the suicides, they're sorry afterwards, especially because, I know I've had my issues before mentally, and I've come out of a bunch of dark places. And sometimes that's very common for people. Throughout the course of their lives, things affect us and things like that. And I think that we're always breathing a sigh of relief when our friends or ourselves make it through a time of extreme darkness. And we're able to overcome that and look back on it and say, wow, I'm really glad that my friends helped me pull through, or this happened. And it's usually something monumental. And we actually credit those people and those circumstances with, quote unquote, saving our lives. I know that there have been times where I've been in some dark spaces, and my life has been saved by someone just reaching out and like, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? You know what I mean? So I think that we all go through it. We can be in a bad mood for 1 hour, and then the next couple hours you're like, hey man, that was just a phase we were going through. And I think that is something that after it's already said and done, you can't reverse it.
Yeah. I find that the energy around a location where there was a suicide is sparkly. And I'm thinking it might be the same for a recent homicide, like a murder would be about the same. But I've never been to, as somebody paying attention to those feelings, never been to a homicide scene. I've been to a lot of homicide scenes, but not paying attention to that side of me. This all has come later on in life where I'm starting to pay attention, going, oh, that's what it is, those things. But it's a sparkly energy as opposed to a constant, like, haunting. Those energies, well, the sparkling I did get, I had a ghost got pissed off with me and walked through me. And we didn't know she was mad until later when we crossed her over, describing why she was angry. You know how you wait like 20 seconds after you ask a question, you wait 20 seconds, give some time, let them get some energy up to answer. We weren't waiting long enough and she got pissed. And she walked through me, and it took the EMF detector that doesn't go, like the cheap made in China one, doesn't go off on a human body. As she walked through me, it was lighting up as she walked through me and all down my arm, and my friend was videotaping it saying, oh, okay, this is screwed up. Anyway, she walked through me, but imagine goosebumps on your back and then goosebumps going through your entire body, feeling them move through your body, out the front, and then down. I got chills on my arm right now. Yeah. And then after she walked through, I got kissed on the cheek twice. And I thought, oh, she kissed me on the cheek. That's really nice. Well, when we crossed her over, we found that, no, she was pissed. She walked through me to say, I'm not talking to you, and I'm here. And then I got kissed on the cheek by a little 8-year-old girl who was in the room too. And I asked the psychic, I said, well, she's 8 years old. I'm 6'2". How did she get to my cheek? And the psychic goes, because she's a ghost, you dummy. It's like she can do that. But we were crossing them over. Oh, we just lost the sound with Rachel, but we're back now, and which is good because she's bouncing back and forth from her residence into this really cool bus that she's building. And if you go onto Instagram, what's your Instagram for your bus?
It's Schooly Fooly.
Schooly Fooly on Instagram is Rachel Hoffman, and what she's done is she's got an old school bus and she's converting it into a living plus space, and it's very, very cool. And my tenant Lucy, who also was saw that and went off to buy a bus. But she's calmed down a little bit more now. Because a little more complicated than she anticipated. So anyway, I just want to throw that in that Rachel, we did lose contact in the Google net here, but we're back. Rachel, one of the things that I needed to talk to you about is, yes, you are off doing the paranormal thing, and you've been doing it for, like you say, about 13 years. But you're on your own with your new project. Tell us a little bit more about this project of you out searching, doing more of the forensic files / paranormal investigating.
So what I want to do is I want to start talking more about the victims and less about the murderers. I want to start laying more interest and more information on who these females were before they were murdered and before they were a victim of a serial killer. And I think it's really important to go and do some field work and talk to people and visit places and kind of slip into their shoes. And I'm really looking forward to kind of going back in time and seeing who these women were before they were, the victim of Ted Bundy, for example. I want to go back and I want to see what their life was and what they wanted to do with themselves. And I think it's really important to have another female who is a mother, a daughter, and an empath in these shoes to be able to relate to these women and to be able to go out and honestly say that I've made an amazing connection.
Well, that's fascinating. And is this something that we can all look forward to seeing, like coming up, or how are we going to get involved?
So as early as next week, I will be doing a lockdown. For now, it's going to be an undisclosed location until I announce it because I don't want people following me there. We've had a lot of visitors throughout the course of the year show up on our filming sites. So I'm very excited to say that I'll be in lockdown about a week from now for 3 days in a haunted location that I'll disclose on Paranormal Xpeditions. And you can all follow me. I will be on site, on location, except for the location owner. I will be completely by myself.
Okay, that's very cool. And you're going to be here for 3 days. This isn't like a Ghost Adventures lockdown where it's 2.5 hours and then they go drinking.
Right.
This is a full-on overnight thing.
Right. And I'm going to try to go live as much as my Wi-Fi will allow. I'm going to do periodic updates, and then I'm basically going to make an episode. There's a really intimate situation happening in a lot of these locations with the owners and the relationship between the owners and the ghosts.
Oh, really?
Yes. Protection, love, malice, all of those things. So each location, you'll notice that there's a different level of emotion.
Okay. Is the property owner going to be staying there with you, too? Like if it's a vacant building or something, is the guy who owns the building going to show up and with a sleeping bag and a digital recorder?
I'm going to allow the owners to be as involved as they would like, but I am going to ask for, moments and times where I'm just kind of going through the process by myself. Again, that level of emotion and things sometimes that's conjured when you're all by yourself, it really does, it elevates the activity in ways that I can't even describe. And I think that it's going to be really important for me to go into these places and show that, it is another, strong female aspect of things. I'm not asking anybody to film me. I'm filming myself. It's very independent. I want people to be inspired by my pursuit.
Oh, that's very cool. And I'm really hope on a 3-day lockdown that you find a place with the plumbing that works.
Thank you so much. I'll put the horror section of how I took care of that in the later reviews.
Yeah, that was just, I'm thinking, because I keep picturing these really cool old buildings and old properties, and I'm thinking, hold on, you're going to stay there overnight and then maybe another day home? Like are you having it catered? So you're really taking this self-quarantine thing down. Like you're getting good at this, are you? It's like, which should be good. Well, that's fascinating. And again, that's something, if you guys want to follow her on, please go to Facebook on Paranormal Xpeditions, and write Xpeditions with an X, not an E. So that's where you're going to find Rachel. Again, on Instagram, you have your own Instagram account, Rachel Hoffman.
Yes.
And then you also have the Schooly Fooly, and you'll have to find that. Actually, if you find Rachel Hoffman on Instagram, then you'll see a link in her little bio to the other one too. So if you're interested in watching Rachel's construction of a school bus turning it into a residence, it's been very cool. It's like, I was quite impressed, and especially with the stuff you got, like the scraps and pieces out of a motorhome that kind of caved in and got the kitchen going. Yeah, so so that's kind of cool. So I'm all about that too, because I like watching you work on that stuff. And so please, Rachel, you're going to get a website up relatively soon?
Yeah, I am working on a website. 2020, I wanted to make my comeback. So I'm going to definitely hook up with some amazing people that have the ability and, talent there to help me with the website.
Good stuff. And
so I don't put the same site.
And I want to thank you for dropping by, and feel free to drop by anytime you want, and we'll catch up. I'm going to hit you up again in a couple of months after you get a few of these locations under your belt, and I want to touch base on what you found and what it's done, and see kind of what direction you've been bounced off into after experiencing what you are going to experience in these locations.
Thank you. I'll be like a leaf blowing in the wind, and then I'll come tell you all about it.
Hey, before you go, really quickly, what do you think happens to us when we die?
I think that it's all very individual. I think that each one of us has a very different spiritual experience once we pass over.
Alrighty. So you don't... Okay. Sure. All right. That'll work. Just wondering if you thought we we turned into energy and we went somewhere else. But you think everyone's individual. That's a good answer to that question, because I've never had that one before. You panicked me.
We all become a matter that is unable to be tested. We don't know what we become exactly as far as what we physically become. I like to, again, refer to us as dehydrated human beings, but we all have our own path, and it's all very, death is like birth, is like life. It's very individual to the person.
Perfect. Thank you, Rachel. Well, we're going to talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been amazing.
Watching you while you sleep on and on.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. And hey. Let's be careful out there.
Far over the snow, what are those voices? They sing as they go. What are those voices? Look up the mountain. We come. Somebody hide. Somebody better hide. On through the hill, like a pack of angry wolves on the trail. We are after you, dead or alive. We are out to get you, dead or alive. And forget yourself. If you're the one, better run away. Son, you are done. Throw your gun away. Here come the Mounties to get the man they're after now. On through the hill, like a pack of angry wolves on the trail. Dead or alive, we are out to get you, dead or alive. If you're the one, better run away. Son, you are done. Throw your gun away. Here come the Mounties to get the man they're after. No!